So, a few days ago Tailwords released patch 1.8.1, and since they weren't satisfied, they released patch 1.9 a few days later. Saying that patch 1.9 was a stepping stone for the game is an understatement. This is the single patch in a long time that addressed the combat AI in a substantial manner. In fact, we can safely say that Bannerlord right now feels like an all different game. And for those who love the RBM AI, they will be pleased to know that the current combat system is much closer to the one of the mod than ever, with foot troops staying in formation when told to charge rather than pushing each other towards the enemy and scattering all over the field in a matter of seconds like they are trying to roleplay a highly effective virus. But today we are not here to address everything that changed in the patch. Other people like Flesson and Strike Gaming and many more already did. But we are here to answer the now more relevant than ever, is Cavalry finally good? Question. The reason as to why this is such a relevant question right now is from these two main changes. With patch 1.8.1, the Cavalry AI was claimed to be fixed, by changing something that had to deal with their melee targeting. Good for you, I was able to finish the cavalry tests on 1.8.1, so we can compare these claimed improvements in comparison to patch 1.8. And the other one was from 1.9 that quite simply changed pretty much all of the mounts high tier troops used, and also improved horse charge damage. Once again, since I was able to run tests on 1.8.1, we can see how this impacted the troops, and I will be showing on screen the 1.8.1 data. But I'm going to focus only on 1.9 for not making the video any longer than what it already will end up being. I will place on the screen the new horses, but won't focus on them as well. Now, if you're new here, well, welcome. But before we get to the data itself, I have to explain to you all the way the tests are run and how the numbers have been gathered. If you simply don't care, you can skip ahead to this timestamp. For this relatively quick update, we will be talking about the 9 high-tier cavalry units, plus a few extra. Those are the Battanian Horseman and Skirmisher, the Vlandian's Vanguard and Banner Knight, the Azerai Vanguard Faris, the Imperial Elite Cataphract, the Sturgian's Horse Raiders and Druzhinnik Champions, the Kusai Heavy Lancer and the Kansguard, and the new Gallant Sword Sister unit, a very unique mounted crossbow troop introduced with 1.9. The tests will only be aimed at mounted melee combat, so Khans and Sword Sisters were told to all fire, while throwing troops like Vanguard, Faris and Horse Raiders were not. First thing first, to anyone that is interested in running tests themselves, I want to address one but very important thing. If you happen to use any mod that increases the combat speed, you will end up with inaccurate data, as the calculations simply don't work the same way. Obviously, I don't expect you to believe me, so that's why I will use data instead. Here is the performance of the Battanian Horseman on patch 1.9 when the test was run at normal speed. And this is the comparison of the same unit on the same patch, but with the RTS camera to improve combat speed up to 3 times. We can clearly see that in this case the results are way more in favor of the unit when the test was performed faster. So I'm sorry to break it to you, but you can cheat the system by making it go faster. And I know it takes a lot of time. It took me around 7 hours just to complete 140 tests at 1 time speed, but it's the most accurate data you can gather. Anyway, going back to the test, the 11 units had to compete in 2 different ones, with a battle size of 300 versus 300. Not against one another, but against a common enemy. The kills and death stats were taken as soon as either all units on one side were killed, or the victory notification popped on the screen. Any extra kills after the notification would not count. For test number 1, spearmen troops with no javelins were used. Those were the tier 1 Imperial Recruit, tier 2 Azerai Tribesmen, tier 3 Azerai Footmen, tier 4 Sturgian Spearmen, and tier 5 Sturgian Heavy Spearmen. And another 2 tests against tier 2 and tier 3 Imperial Militia were also run to gather more data on low tier performance. In total, this will end up accounting for 7 tests for each unit, ending up in 70 tests overall. The combination of command used was Shield Wall and Charge for all troops. That is still the most reliable combo for cavalry units without any player input. And also, in order to understand the power of the units, a common ground had to be found. For some troops, like the Banner Knights and Vanguards, loose formation seems to work best, but just against lower tiers, and then losing the advantage against higher tiers. So even for them, Shield Wall was still the choice. In the second test, the units had to perform against archers. In this case, they were all from the Imperial line, as they tend to be the most common troop to fight in a campaign. Once again, the same rules for test number 1 applied, with shield wall and charge being the combination of commands used. The data I'm going to be showing is the average of both tests combined. As you can see, I haven't talked about the dismounted test, since I haven't run for all of them. I am waiting on those until we cover all shielded troops, so we can compare them better. So, with this very lengthy but necessary introduction done, let's start from the worst troop to the best. And since I'm going to repeat them a lot throughout the video, keep in mind that KD means kills to death ratio, and Kia means killed in action. At number 11, we have the Gallant Sword Sister. I must say I haven't run them against archers, but I think it was unnecessary. They rank last in all testing stats against spearmen, so that was enough abuse for them. The sisters ended up with a KD of 6.68 against low tiers, and 0.66 against high tiers. Needless to say, their worst performance was against the tier 5 spearmen, where they only managed a 0.03 KD. In terms of Kia, the sisters ended up with a casualty chance of 24.27 against low tiers, and 80.83% against high tiers. A rank you would assume, as this troop quite literally has no helmet, and a less than ideal body and horse armor for a cavalry troop. But what they might not bring in quality, they bring in uniqueness, being the second troop in the game with both a mount and a crossbow. The other one is the Vlandian Caravan Guard. At number 10, we have the Battanian Horseman with an average rank of 8.9, just 0.1 points less than the worst possible rank. But even if their position might have not changed, that doesn't necessarily mean they haven't improved. In fact, the Battanian Horsemen are more than twice as good than they were before. Their average KD against low tiers has improved by 231% from patch 1.8, now sitting at a respectable 6.1. But it was over 60 during patch 1.8.1. I don't know what substance they were abusing in that one, but they were quite solid. Going back to patch 1.9, their KD against high tiers has improved from a terrible 0.3 to a 1. Still not the best by any stretch, but a solid improvement of 217%. In terms of Kia though, the Horsemen have recorded an increase from 15.3 to 20% against low tiers, but have compensated that by reducing their Kia against high tiers from 73.3 to 64.8. Overall, the Horseman is still quite a bad unit, but it's a much needed improvement. At number 9, we have the Vlandian Vanguard, with an average rank of 7.95. Like the Battanian Horsemen, the Vanguard has seen a significant improvement from patch 1.8, with their KD against low tiers being improved from 13.4 to 57.1, an improvement of 326%, while their KD against high tiers also improved from 1.3 to 7.5, an improvement of almost 500%. Their Kia score against low tiers also decreased from 7.3 to 2.8, but their Kia score against high tiers increased by a marginal 4%. The Vanguard transformed into a much more competitive cheap alternative to the Banner Knights, but are still not even close to the best standard tier 5 cavalry in the game. At number 8, we have the Sturgian Horse Raider. The Horse Raider is one of those troops that took a bit of an hit in patch 1.8.1, but then lacking performance quickly disappeared with patch 1.9. And here, the Horse Raiders recorded an increase of 112% in their KD against low tiers from 15.6 to 33.1, and also recorded an increase against high tiers of 127% from 4.3 to 9.8. The positive trend continued for them in the Kia stats, where they lowered the casualty chance against low tiers to 4.8% and the casualty chance against high tiers to 31.1%. Despite making the unit much more competitive, this unit still has some very big shortcomings. But if their performance when dismounted is anywhere close to what it was in 1.8, they are still an interesting gadget unit. At number 7, we have the Khuzite Heavy Lancer with an average rank of 5.8. The Heavy Lancer is the most improved cavalry unit in patch 1.9, and this can be seen in their KD against low tier stat that improved from 9.4 to 99.9, a change of 960%. And an even bigger improvement was their KD against high tiers, that changed from 1.4 to 22.3, an increase of 1498%. Yes, let me say that again, 1498%. Balanced. The massive positive trend for the heavy lancers continued in the Kia stats, where they lowered their Kia against low to 2.3%, a change of 78% from patch 1.8, and a lesser but still significant change from 54.5% to 34.67% against high tiers, a decrease in casualties of 36%. So it looks like Tailwords is going full "no accused shall ever be weak" mode. This unit is kinda scary now. Their casualty chance are pretty low and their KD is very solid. Still, not really close to the Horse Archer cousins, but be aware of the heavy lancers. They are no longer the weakest Kusai troop. At number 6, we have the last standard cavalry unit, the Battanian Mounted Skirmisher, with an average rank of 5. Once again, these guys proved to be the most slept-on cavalry troop in Bannerlord. If you have followed my channel from this summer, you should know I even lowballed these guys in my troop analysis by giving them a 3 out of 5. But they keep proving to be a very solid unit since patch 1.8 improved the throwing AI. Anyway, the Mounted Skirmishers improved their performance against low tiers from 10 to 59.2. A change of 492%, but they decreased their KD against high tiers by a substantial 80% from 70.8 to 14.2. Don't worry, it's not as bad as it sounds because both their Kia scores decreased. The Kia against low tiers changed from 10% to 2.8%, a decrease of 72%, while their Kia against high tiers changed from 29.1% to 17.9%, a decrease of 38%. Overall, a very solid unit that synergizes very well with the Battanian doctrine, but isn't anything great. At number 5, we have the Vlandian Banner Knights, with an average rank of 3.25. And here is where the fun begins. It's now time to cover the noble troops. Although the Banner Knights are the first to be covered, and thus meaning they must also be the weakest, one important thing to say about these guys is that they were beasts against infantry, but quite poor against the archers. The second test was the one that brought them down to this rank. I know, it sucks, but data is an hard thing to argue with. Anyway, the Banner Knights improved their performance against low tiers from 34.8 to 202.3, a change of 482%. They also increased their KD against high tiers by a substantial 98%, from 34 to 67.3. The Kia against low tiers changed from 2.7% to 0.6%, a decrease of 76%, while their Kia versus high tiers changed from 43.8% to 23.4%, a decrease of 47%. Even if they might not be the best noble cavalry in terms of performance, they are not a bad unit or even mediocre. The Banner Knights are very good, and if we consider how beastly they were on foot in patch 1.8, you get a very solid unit that can be used in a few different ways and provides a huge bonus when sieging. At number 4 we have the Druzhinnik champion, with an average rank of 3. One step away from the podium, this unit definitely wants to prove everyone wrong, but it was unable to beat the numbers despite being very solid. The champions in fact improved their KD against low tiers from 44.3 to 184.9, an increase of 317%, while their KD against high tiers was improved by a marginal 6% from 70.3 to 74.8. But the biggest improvements came in their Kia scores. They changed from 2% to 0.5% against low tiers, and from 41.3% to 18.8% against high tiers. Both of these changes have reduced the casualties by at least 55%. Overall, the Druzhinniks are up there with the best units, despite falling short of the podium. The stats are very solid for mounted combat, and if their foot performance is still solid, you get another unit you can use in multiple ways. At number 3 we have the Azrai Vanguard Faris, with an average rank of 2.85. I honestly don't know how many people expected this, but I can tell you that I wasn't one for sure. The Vanguards were a solid unit in 1.8, but when it came down to mounted combat they struggled in comparison to the rest after running out of javelins. It looks like that's no longer the case in 1.9. Anyway, the Vanguards improved their KD against low tiers from 49.2 to 228.3, a change of 364%, but lost a marginal 5% against high tiers from 23.5 to 22.4. When it comes to the key against low stat, the Vanguard improved from 2% to 0.5%. And also improved against high tiers from 38% to 10.4%, both resulting in a decrease of 70% in casualties. Overall, the Faris look like a dangerous unit to both face and fight with, although knowing they weren't great dismounted doesn't make them feel like a podium unit. But this is just mounted stats we are looking at, and they claimed it with merit in the end. At number 2 we have the Khan's Guard with an average rank of 2.05. Although they might still not be the best in mounted melee, we all know that doesn't really make them any weaker. If these stats allow them to shoot, they would obviously be the uncontested best. But let's talk about their stats. Starting from the KD against low tiers, the Khans have improved it from 75 to 219.5. An increase of almost 200%. But for their KD against high tiers, there was a massive decrease from 222.5 to 88.6, a decrease of 61%. Overall, their performance against high tiers seems to have gone down a bit, as they also recorded a marginal increase of 3% in their key and stat against high tiers, from 3.25 to 3.33. This is such a small change though. Now, these changes might seem alarming at first, but they really isn't, let me tell you why. Both stats are lower because as far as the AI goes, the Khans have stayed the exact same, kinda, while spear users got better. In fact, the extra casualties have all been recorded against spearmen, with the archers staying the same. This means that spearmen troops are a little bit better at dealing with them, especially during the first charge where most of the units tend to die. When you have a unit as good as the Khans, even a handful of extra casualties can swing the score in a significant way, but when you really look into it, it's not anything to worry about. In 14 tests, the Khans have in fact lost less than 50 units, while the Bannerlord Horsemen have lost at least 50 units in half of their tests. The Khans are still the most overpowered and terribly designed unit they have always been, but troops around them are getting better. At number 1 we have the only unit remaining, the Imperial Elite Cataphract. Once again, despite the massive changes that came with 1.9, the Cataphracts are still the best cavalry troop in terms of melee performance, with an average rank of 1.25. Their KD against low tiers decreased from 277 to 266.4, a marginal change of -4%, but their KD against high tiers increased from 57.3 to 102.6, a change of 79%. While their key and stat against low tiers changed from 0.3 to 0.2, and their key and stat against high tiers changed from 11.8 to 10.9. Now these stats might feel strange to most, since the Cataphracts when told to shield wall can't use their spears, so they will instead use only their sword. But you might be forgetting about the horse change. The Cataphracts no longer use the Imperial Charger, but now use the Palmation. This beast improved their charge damage from 12 to 28. Increased their speed from 44 to 59, kept the same maneuver, at the cost of 70 extra HP. They weren't honestly that important, since the Cataphracts have 75 horse armor. And with this final focus on the Cataphract horse, we can address how changing the horse impacted the troops. Before the horse changes in patch 1.8.1, the troops had very similar casualty stats with patch 1.9, but what really changed a lot was the KD against both high and low tiers among the two patches. In patch 1.8.1 we recorded an average increase of 179.4% against high tiers in comparison to patch 1.8, while on patch 1.9 we recorded an average increase of 237.5% in the same category, so the horses seem to have helped in making the troops more effective against high tiers. But, and it's a big one, during patch 1.8.1 the average increase against low tiers was 555.9%, which is massive, while on patch 1.9 the average increase was just 347.2, so still far better than 1.8, but not as good as patch 1.8.1. This leaves me with one main culprit: the horses. The new horses aren't just better, but they are also different. And the stat I want to focus on right now is speed. The 1.8.1 horses average speed was 51.8, while the 1.9 horses average is 54.3. Now, the way the game works when calculating any kind of damage is something like this. It will consider the speed of the impact and the base damage of the weapon, with thrust attacks receiving a larger bonus than other kind of attacks. Obviously, there are some more dynamics to this, but I want to keep it simple. What I'm trying to say is that the increase in speed of the horses ends up making the mounted units more vulnerable in the end, for the simple reason that as they can deal more damage to a foot unit, the same goes the other way around, with a foot unit delivering more damage to a rider. And this theory can be seen in action when talking about casualty against low tiers. Since most cavalry units in 1.8.1 would have one-shotted the lower tiers even without the extra speed, this ends up in less casualties. But in 1.9, because of the extra speed, they resulted in being more vulnerable. Although this is important to keep in mind, we have to not forget that in both patches the cavalry units improved due to the thrusting AI improvements. Now, let's talk about the charge damage, as this should work as a counter to the extra speed of the units. In fact, in the versus I tier situation, we see an improvement in patch 1.9 in relation to patch 1.8.1. And with the average horse charge damage changing from 10.1 to 23.4, more than doubling the old values, what happens is that we end up improving the units in this scenario, as battles against better equipped and skilled units tend to last longer, allowing for the charge damage of the horse to have a more drastic impact on the battle. So when Tailwords changed the horses, they made the units worse at dealing with lower tiers, but made them better at dealing with higher ones. I don't know if this was the intention, but this is what the data leads me to believe. In my opinion, making the cavalry troops better at dealing with lower tiers is the best option for the current vanilla meta, since the enemy lords don't generally bring enough high tiers to the fights, and most armies are generally composed of anything ranging from tier 1 to tier 4, with a very small percentage being tier 5 and tier 6. Anyway, let's stop this tangent and address the question you wanted me to ask. Is cavalry finally good? Well, I'm afraid I have to tell you that it depends. All the tests were run on a valley map, plain M, and I used only the spawns that were best suited for cavalry combat. So in an open map, cavalry is really solid. I'd say all the noble troops are where they should be, with the standard ones being in a better spot, but not quite there. The only unit I would consider really weak at this stage is still the Batanian Horseman. But units like the Vlandian Vanguards and the Kusai Heavy Lancer are definitely not less than decent. In a way, I think this is fair. Cavalry historically was terrain independent, and it was not uncommon for knights to be dismounted and used in different ways. So units that can do both roles effectively are still the top performers in my opinion. Anyway, this should have been fast update on cavalry is done. And in a few days time I will bring up to you the shock troopers and most importantly answer the "is the pikeman finally good?" question? Down in the description you can find a spreadsheet for both 1.8, 1.8.1 and 1.9 data. Thank you all for watching and I hope you found this video informative.